This is the story of how America was stolen, episode 16. After the retaliation that followed the Great Strike of 1622, something irreversible happened in the colonies. The violence was no longer reactive. It was no longer chaotic. It was no longer framed as survival. It became policy. This episode marks the moment when war against native nations stopped being temporary and became permanent. The English colony of Virginia emerged from the conflict hardened, disciplined, and ruthless. Colonial leaders no longer spoke of peace or cooperation. Instead, they spoke in the language of removal, control, and domination. Native nations were no longer neighbors. They were obstacles. And obstacles, in colonial thinking, were meant to be cleared. Laws were passed that stripped native people of any legal standing. Native land could now be claimed simply by occupying it. If native families were forced off through violence or fear, settlers declared the land vacant. This legal trick became a weapon more powerful than any musket. Because once the law says land is empty, no crime exists in taking it. Colonial militias became permanent institutions. These were not emergency forces. They were standing armies whose sole purpose was to expand settlement and suppress native resistance. Militia patrols moved outward from colonial towns like slow, grinding gears. They built forts deep inside native territory. These forts weren't defensive. They were pressure points, designed to project power and intimidate surrounding villages. Every fort meant another piece of land was about to fall, and wherever settlers followed, native life was disrupted. The English also perfected a strategy that would be used again and again across North America: divide and control. They exploited rivalries between tribes, offering weapons or protection to some while attacking others. They used translators to manipulate negotiations. They promised safety to tribes that surrendered, and then broke those promises once resistance weakened. Trust was destroyed deliberately, and without trust, unity became harder to sustain. Meanwhile, Europe kept sending people. More settlers arrived each year, carrying no memory of treaties, no understanding of native culture, and no guilt over what had been done before them. They arrived into a world already shaped by violence and were told a simple story. This land is dangerous. The natives are hostile. We are defending ourselves. They were never told the truth. For native nations, life became a constant calculation of survival. Should they fight and risk annihilation? Should they flee and lose their homeland forever? Should they attempt peace with people who had never honored it? Entire communities fractured under this pressure. Some chose resistance, others chose retreat. Some tried accommodation, hoping survival meant compromise. None of the options were safe. By the mid-1600s, the idea that native people could coexist with settlers as equals was gone. Colonial writings openly described native nations as temporary, a dying race meant to disappear as civilization expanded. This belief wasn't accidental. It was designed to justify everything that followed, because if a people are believed to be disappearing anyway, then speeding up that disappearance feels acceptable. Opechancanough would live to see this transformation. Captured in his later years, blinded, weakened, but unbroken, he remained defiant until the end. Even in captivity, he refused to beg. His resistance terrified the colonists, because it reminded them that conquest had not been welcomed. It had been fought. His death did not end resistance. It taught future generations that survival itself was an act of defiance. Episode 16 shows us the truth many history books avoid. America was not built through accidental conflict. It was built through intentional policy. Policy that rewarded land theft. Policy that normalized violence. Policy that treated native existence as a problem to be solved. And this policy would not stay in Virginia. In episode 17, the pattern spreads north and south, as other colonies adopt the same model, and the war against native nations becomes continental.